Hollywood often shows us faces polished, marketable, carefully framed for mass appeal. But some stories go far deeper than what appears on screen. Some identities carry history, struggle, and legacy that rarely make the spotlight. Today, we're talking about actors the world thought it understood, performers long placed into neat visual categories, while their black heritage quietly existed in the background. This list isn't about shock value, it's about recognition. Because identity isn't just about appearance, it's about history and who gets seen. 1. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. When you hear the name Dwayne Johnson, you think of power, charisma, and one of the most bankable stars on the planet. From wrestling arenas to global box office dominance, his rise feels almost mythical. But what many people don't realize is that The Rock's black heritage is a foundational part of who he is. His father, Rocky Johnson, wasn't just a professional wrestler, he was one of the first black champions to break through a heavily white-dominated industry. Rocky Johnson came from the Black Nova Scotian community, a group with a long, often overlooked history of resilience and struggle. That legacy didn't just give Dwayne physical strength, it gave him perspective. In interviews, Dwayne Johnson has spoken openly about his connection to the black community, even as Hollywood often framed him as racially neutral or ambiguous to maximize global appeal. But identity doesn't disappear just because it's made convenient. The Rock's journey reflects a larger Hollywood pattern where black heritage is often softened, diluted, or left unspoken, even when it sits at the very core of a superstar's story. 2. Zendaya. Zendaya is known worldwide as a fashion icon, an award-winning actress, and the voice of a new generation. Her confidence feels effortless, her presence feels intentional. But when people label her as racially ambiguous, they miss the truth entirely. Zendaya's father is African American, and she has always openly acknowledged her black identity. From her earliest roles to her biggest red carpet moments, she never hid where she comes from, she embraced it. She has spoken about how the industry often tries to package her as a safe or marketable version of blackness. Yet Zendaya consistently pushes back, choosing roles, styling, and public statements that affirm her identity rather than dilute it. When she wears natural hair or Afrocentric fashion on the world's biggest stages, it isn't just style, it's a declaration. Zendaya represents a generation that refuses to shrink its blackness to make others comfortable. 3. Halle Berry. Halle Berry's name is etched into history, the first black woman to win the Academy Award for Best Actress, a milestone that came with both celebration and weight. But her story has always existed in a complicated space. With an African American father and a white mother, Halle Berry grew up navigating racial tension and identity conflict from an early age. In Hollywood, she was often told she was too black for some roles and not black enough for others. Still, she never denied who she was. Her success wasn't just about talent, it was about persistence within a system that wasn't built for her. That Oscar win wasn't only a personal victory, it was a door opening for countless black actresses who had spent decades watching opportunities pass them by. Halle Berry's story reminds us that how the world sees you doesn't always reflect who you are, and sometimes, claiming your identity is the most powerful achievement of all. 4. Zoe Kravitz. Zoe Kravitz is often seen as effortlessly cool, moving seamlessly between music, fashion, and film. But her identity runs far deeper than style or celebrity. At its core, her story is about black heritage, cultural duality, and the quiet complexity of belonging. Her father, Lenny Kravitz, is a black artist of mixed heritage, while her mother, Lisa Bonet, comes from an African American and Ashkenazi Jewish background. Zoe grew up in an environment where black culture wasn't theoretical, it was lived, practiced, and passed down. Yet Hollywood frequently places Zoe in racially ambiguous roles, where her blackness is present, but rarely acknowledged. She has spoken about feeling caught between worlds, not fully embraced by either, yet shaped by both. Despite this, Zoe Kravitz has never denied her black identity. In interviews, she has made it clear that being biracial does not make blackness optional. It is part of her lived reality. Her work and public voice reflect a truth many share. Identity doesn't always need explanation. Sometimes it simply needs to be honored. 5. Rashida Jones. Rashida Jones is often associated with intelligence, charm, and understated elegance. But behind that familiar image lies a story shaped by race, lineage, and quiet resistance. Her father, Quincy Jones, is a legendary African American cultural icon. Her mother is white and Jewish, and Rashida was raised in a Jewish household, a detail that has often led people to question or dismiss her black identity altogether. Rashida has openly discussed how she has spent much of her life being told she wasn't black enough. In Hollywood, she was frequently labeled as safe, confusing, or non-threatening, as if black identity could only exist within narrow visual boundaries. Her story proves otherwise. Blackness is not defined solely by appearance, it is rooted in ancestry, history, and lived experience. Rashida Jones represents the many biracial individuals who find themselves standing between worlds, yet refusing to erase any part of who they are. Zex. Meghan Markle. Meghan Markle first entered the public eye as a Hollywood actress, but her life took a dramatic turn when she became part of the British royal family. Yet beyond the headlines and controversy lies a deeper narrative, that of a biracial black woman navigating power, tradition, and identity under a global spotlight. Meghan's mother, Doria Ragland, is African American, while her father comes from a white background. From an early age, Meghan learned to understand and accept her mixed identity. She has spoken about the discomfort of being forced to choose a single racial box on school forms, a moment that stayed with her. After marrying into royalty, Meghan's black identity became impossible to ignore. Media scrutiny, coded language, and subtle racism transformed her presence into a cultural flashpoint. Still, she never denied who she was. Her story reveals an uncomfortable truth. When black or biracial women approach positions of power, society's unease often surfaces. Meghan Markle is no longer just a duchess, she has become a symbol of how black identity challenges even the most rigid institutions. 2. Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey has spent decades being recognized for her voice, a once-in-a-generation talent that redefined pop and R&B. But while the world focused on her music, many overlooked an important part of her identity. Mariah Carey is biracial. Her father was African American with Afro-Venezuelan heritage, and her mother is white of Irish descent. Growing up, Mariah experienced racism and identity-based rejection at an early age, something she has spoken about with honesty and restraint. Because of her lighter complexion and mainstream success, Mariah was often perceived as racially ambiguous. Yet she has consistently identified as a black woman and acknowledged how difficult it was to grow up feeling in between, not fully accepted by either side. Her success didn't erase that struggle. In fact, it amplified it. As her fame grew, so did the pressure to downplay her blackness to fit industry expectations. Still, Mariah never denied her roots. Her story is a reminder that visibility doesn't always equal understanding, and that even global superstardom can't shield someone from the complexities of racial identity. 8. Alicia Keys. Alicia Keys has always carried herself with intention, from her music to her activism to her refusal to conform to industry norms. But behind her poised presence is a deeply personal story of identity. Alicia Keys is biracial. Her father is African American, and her mother is white with Italian and European ancestry. Raised primarily by her mother, Alicia grew up navigating a world that often questioned where she truly belonged. From the beginning of her career, the music industry attempted to define her visually, sometimes minimizing her black identity to make her more marketable. But Alicia chose a different path. Whether embracing natural hair, rejecting heavy makeup, or speaking openly about race and self-acceptance, Alicia Keys has consistently used her platform to affirm black identity without compromise. Her journey shows that blackness doesn't need to be performed or explained, it simply exists, quietly powerful and unapologetically present. 9. Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel's case is one of the most misunderstood on this list, and also one of the most sensitive. Vin Diesel has publicly stated that his biological father is unknown. He was raised by his adoptive father, Irving Vincent, an African-American man, and grew up within a black household and black cultural environment. Because of this, Diesel has described his ethnicity as ambiguous. Hollywood often placed him into roles where race was intentionally undefined, allowing audiences to project whatever identity felt most comfortable. Over time, this led many people to assume he was white, but Vin Diesel's upbringing, cultural grounding, and lived experience are closely tied to the black community. Rather than making definitive claims about ancestry, Diesel's story highlights how race is sometimes shaped not only by bloodlines, but by environment, culture, and lived reality. His inclusion reminds us that identity is not always clean, clear, or easily categorized, especially in an industry that prefers simplicity over truth. 10. Wentworth Miller. Wentworth Miller rose to global fame as the face of Time's Prison Break Time's sharp-featured, intense, and often perceived as racially ambiguous. For years, many viewers assumed he was white, but his heritage tells a very different story. Miller was born to a black father of Jamaican and African American descent, and a white mother with European ancestry. Despite this, Hollywood rarely acknowledged his black identity, frequently placing him in roles where race was left undefined. In interviews, Wentworth Miller has spoken candidly about how his appearance allowed the industry and audiences to overlook his blackness entirely. He has also discussed how that erasure affected his sense of belonging, especially in an environment where representation often depends on visible markers. His story reflects a broader pattern in entertainment. Black identity that doesn't fit a narrow visual expectation is often ignored rather than embraced. Wentworth Miller's experience highlights how easily heritage can be erased when it challenges conventional categories. 11. Jennifer Beals. Jennifer Beals became an icon almost overnight with Flashdance Times, a film that defined an era. Yet behind the fame, many viewers were unaware of her racial background. Jennifer Beals is biracial. Her father was African American, and her mother is Irish American. From early in her career, she found herself navigating an industry that struggled to place her too racially ambiguous for some roles, too visibly black for others. Beals has spoken about growing up conscious of race, particularly after losing her father at a young age. Despite Hollywood's uncertainty, she remained grounded in her identity, choosing roles that challenged stereotypes rather than reinforcing them. Her career stands as a reminder that black heritage doesn't always come with a predictable narrative, and that visibility alone doesn't guarantee understanding or acceptance. 12. Troian Belisario. Troian Belisario is widely known for her role in Time's Pretty Little Liars*, often associated with intelligence, intensity, and emotional depth. But her background surprised many fans. Troian's mother, Deborah Pratt, is African American, while her father, Donald P. Belisario, is white. Despite being biracial, Troian has frequently been perceived as white, a perception shaped largely by Hollywood casting norms. Troian has spoken openly about how her identity is often questioned or dismissed because of her appearance. Yet she has never denied her black heritage, acknowledging how being biracial places her in a complicated space within the industry. Her story underscores a recurring truth. When black identity doesn't align with expectations, it is often rendered invisible even to those watching most closely. 13. Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Hall spent much of her early career being perceived as white, a refined British actress with a classical image. For years, even she herself was unaware of a crucial part of her ancestry. Rebecca Hall's mother, Maria Ewing, was a celebrated opera singer who publicly identified as white for most of her life. It wasn't until later, through genealogical research revealed on Time's Finding Your Roots*, that Rebecca discovered her mother had African American ancestry that had been hidden for generations. This revelation reshaped Rebecca Hall's understanding of her own identity. She has spoken about the emotional weight of realizing how race had been deliberately concealed in her family history, not out of denial, but survival. Her story highlights a painful reality. In many families, black identity wasn't erased by choice, but by necessity. Rebecca Hall represents how history can silence heritage and how reclaiming it, even later in life, still matters. 14. Halsey. Halsey has always stood outside the mold musically, visually, and culturally, but one aspect of her identity has often been misunderstood or overlooked entirely. Halsey is biracial. Her father is African American, and her mother has Italian and Hungarian ancestry. Because of her lighter complexion, many people assumed she was white, an assumption that followed her into the public eye. She has spoken openly about feeling disconnected from how the world perceived her versus how she experienced herself. In moments of vulnerability, Halsey has addressed the isolation that can come from being biracial and not looking the part society expects. Her honesty challenges a dangerous idea that black identity must be visually proven. Halsey's story reminds us that heritage exists, whether or not it's immediately visible. Pete Wentz. Pete Wentz rose to fame as the bassist and lyricist of Fall Out Boy, often framed as an alternative rock figure far removed from conversations about race. But his background tells a more complex story. Pete Wentz's mother is of Afro-Jamaican descent, while his father is white. Growing up, Pete was deeply aware of his mixed heritage, even as the music industry largely ignored it. In a genre that rarely made space for black identity, Wentz was often categorized without nuance, his race left unspoken, his background erased by assumption. Yet he has never denied his roots, acknowledging how race shaped his experiences even when it wasn't visible to fans. His inclusion highlights how Black heritage is frequently overlooked in spaces where it's considered unexpected, not absent, just ignored. 16. Logic. Logic built his career, telling raw, autobiographical stories, yet one part of his identity has been persistently questioned. Logic is biracial. His father is Black, and his mother is white. Growing up, he experienced poverty, instability, and racial isolation, often feeling caught between two worlds, without fully belonging to either. Because of his lighter complexion, Logic has frequently faced skepticism about his Black identity. Critics and audiences alike have questioned his right to claim it. Logic has openly spoken about this tension, explaining that being biracial doesn't erase Blackness, it complicates it. His story exposes a harsh reality. Black identity is often policed, even by those within the community. Logic's experiences show how damaging it can be when heritage is measured by appearance rather than lived experience. Onyedi. Maya Rudolph. Maya Rudolph grew up surrounded by music, creativity, and culture, but her racial background was rarely part of her public image early on. Her mother, Minnie Riperton, was a legendary African-American singer, while her father is of Ashkenazi Jewish descent. Despite this, Maya was often perceived as white, especially during her early years in comedy. She has spoken about growing up biracial and navigating identity in spaces where Blackness wasn't expected. Over time, Maya embraced her heritage more openly, allowing it to exist naturally within her work rather than explaining it. Her career reflects the idea that Black identity doesn't always demand visibility, sometimes it simply needs room to exist without justification. Artin. Lisa Bonet. Lisa Bonet has long been celebrated for her beauty, individuality, and cultural influence, but her heritage is often misunderstood. Lisa Bonet's father was African American, and her mother is Ashkenazi Jewish. From the start of her career, her appearance challenged Hollywood's narrow definitions of race. Bonet has consistently resisted labels, choosing instead to live authentically, yet her connection to Black culture and Black history has always been present, even when the industry struggled to categorize her. Her story reinforces a central truth of this list. Black identity is not monolithic. It exists in many forms, many shades, and many lived realities. Santoista. Vanessa Williams. Vanessa Williams became a household name long before conversations about representation entered the mainstream. In 1983, she made history as the first Black woman to be crowned Miss America, a moment that should have marked pure progress. Instead, it exposed deep-rooted discomfort with Black success. Vanessa faced intense backlash, scrutiny, and humiliation that forced her resignation. Yet she refused to disappear. With time, Vanessa Williams rebuilt her career on her own terms, becoming an accomplished singer, actress, and performer. Her Black identity was never something she distanced herself from. It was something the world struggled to accept. Her story is about resilience and about how Black excellence often comes with an unfair price attached. Venti. Jessica Zur. Jessica Zur rose to prominence through Time's Gossip Girl *, often presented as the girl next door, with an effortlessly mainstream image. For many viewers, her racial background was never questioned, but Jessica Zur is biracial. She has African American ancestry on her father's side, alongside European heritage. Because of her appearance, she has frequently been perceived as white. Jessica has spoken about how her identity is often overlooked or dismissed entirely. Her experience highlights how Black ancestry can be erased not through denial, but through assumption. Her story reflects how representation gaps aren't always loud or dramatic, sometimes they exist quietly, hidden in plain sight. 21. Derek Jeter. Derek Jeter is widely celebrated as one of the greatest baseball players of all time, a symbol of leadership, discipline, and excellence. Yet throughout his career, many fans assumed he was white, overlooking his background entirely. Derek Jeter's father is African American, and his mother is white. Jeter has spoken about growing up with a strong awareness of race, particularly as a Black athlete navigating a predominantly white sport. Still, his public image often stripped that context away. His story underscores how Black identity in sports can be selectively acknowledged, celebrated when convenient, ignored when uncomfortable. 22. Kimora Lee Simmons. Kimora Lee Simmons embodies confidence, power, and cultural impact. But her background has often been reduced to aesthetics rather than acknowledged fully. Kimura's father is African American, while her mother is of Japanese and Korean descent. Raised in a multicultural household, she grew up navigating multiple identities at once. In fashion and media, Kimura was frequently exoticized rather than understood, yet she used that visibility to build an empire, redefining beauty standards and opening doors for women of color in industries that rarely made space for them. Her story closes this list with a powerful truth. Black identity is not a limitation, it is a foundation. This list was never about revealing secrets. It was about revealing perspective. For decades, Hollywood and the public have relied on appearance to define identity. But these stories show how misleading that approach can be. Black heritage doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it's softened, hidden, ignored, or erased, not by the individuals, but by the systems around them. Each name on this list represents a different expression of Black identity, shaped by history, culture, struggle, and resilience. Together, they challenge a single, narrow definition of what Blackness looks like, because identity isn't something you guess by looking, it's something you understand by listening.